I'm curious about this next one. The Canberra Raiders. Jamie on Ask Gus, and we were inundated with questions from our listeners for this first episode. Jamie says, just how big a loss is Jack Whiten? They're lacking star power. I can see them at the bottom of the ladder this year. Hold that thought, Gus. Zach Hosking, Simi Sasungi, Morgan Smithies and Kyo Weeks have headed to Canberra. Jared Croker's retired. Matt Fuller's gone overseas. Harley Smith-Shields has gone to the Gold Coast. Clay Webb was released. And obviously Jack Whiten has gone to South Sydney. Losing an Origin and international player who was their 5'8" is a big hurdle to overcome. But I think, Gus, what a lot of people are overlooking is that Ricky's blooded, particularly in the last year, some very, very good emerging forwards, but maybe in the halves is their issue.
Yeah, it is. And look, Jack Whiten, I think, was a huge loss, and you saw it play out quite emotionally when he'd made the decision to go to South Sydney mid-season. And the Raiders, whilst understanding, were quite upset about it, and they haven't been able to replace him. They haven't been able to find anything of his equivalent, obviously, but certainly there doesn't seem to be any defined plan there as to who becomes their leadership and becomes their chief playmaker. As you say, during the tough times, they've been able to blood a lot of good young forwards and some of these players, and they're always competitive. One of the things I did notice in particular over the Christmas period was an interview at a Raiders training session with Josh Papali'i, and he looked fitter than I have seen him for several years. I mean, he looked really lean and really focused, and if that's an indication of how the whole club has trained, then it's a really good sign. I note with interest, whilst it was only a trial game, they certainly did well on the weekend in their first outing, which they didn't do last year. They lost their first trial under similar circumstances, and the season didn't go according to plan. But if Josh Papali'i's appearances that I saw from him is any indication of the regime they've had during the off-season, and I think most clubs will have had a better regime this year than probably in previous years, affected by COVIDs and World Cups and all the other sort of things. I think that the Raiders will be ready. It's really funny, this comp. Outside the top two, then you've probably got another 3 or 4 who you say, okay, well, they'll probably make the 8. The rest of it's up for grabs. It's going to come down to injuries and depth of talent and the draw and whether young fellas can graduate through to that next level. I think the whole competition, particularly the back half of the competition, has suffered in recent years because of the COVID years and lack of development and players being exposed to the top grade probably before they're ready. But a lot of them are starting to get 20 and 30 games under their belt now and feeling a bit more comfortable.
I just want to ask you about a couple of players, though, in particular for Canberra. Ethan Strange, who's the young half, who's well touted.
Promising.
And Kyo Weeks, who's the signing from Manly, who's really a utility player. He's played all over the park. Now, clearly Fogarty's going to be halfback. It's between the other two to be 6. What can you tell us about those two players?
Well, either one could do it. I think probably Ethan Strange, to me, is the more logical choice. But he's still very young. It's the thing about these kids, and you see them in junior rep football, and you might even see them in junior representative football, and they're playing in age grade football. They've got to do it against men. They've got to do it. They've got to get to the NRL, and it's not just getting them to the NRL. The development process, getting them to the NRL is one thing. It's then being able to win with them is another, and sometimes that takes years. You ask the greatest players, and even all the fellas that work in our commentary team. Your Jonathan Thurstons and Brad Fittlers, and ask them when they made first grade, in hindsight, how real ready were they, and when did they really feel like a first grader, and when did they feel as though they could influence results and go from there, And they're the champion players, so it's harder for everybody else. It's one thing to get them through to first grade, then they've got to learn to win and win consistently. And until they've played 60 or 100 first grade games, they're still in the learning phase. So they've got a long way to go, but you've got to start somewhere. And the Raiders have been on a development arc for a couple of years. Their junior reps have improved, and they've got some kids coming through, and these are talented boys. It's just time at the crease now. The good thing is that he's got a good core group of forwards around them. Where young halves and backs struggle is where the club doesn't have enough strength or leadership and depth in the forwards, and they can't really play with the confidence that they need. They get targeted a lot more. I think the Raiders, have probably ticked that little box a little bit. But if you're thinking premiership, no. Top 4, no. Top 8, they can sneak in at the back end, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Mariota and Puru, who got 2 games at the end of last year.
Yeah.
Mooney.
Yeah.
I know Goula's been there a while.
They're on the learning curve, mate. Yeah, they really are. And this team's got to become far more seasoned before I think it's playing for a title. Mind you, they can beat a top side on their day.
Yeah.
If they have a good day, they can beat a top side. Anyone can beat anyone. But
So a lot of people are saying wooden spoon Raiders.
no, I don't see that.
Okay.
I certainly don't see that.
There you go.
That won't happen.